He stood there alone, hands wrapped around a helmet he shouldn't have been carrying, asking strangers for $5 because he hadn't eaten all day. But the moment he whispered whose helmet it was, everything changed. This is how a hungry kid walked into the wrong place at the right time and reopened a wound a whole club thought had already healed. The door to Crow Hollow Riders didn't creak when Jamie pushed it open. It groaned, like it was annoyed at being disturbed. Inside, the air smelled like motor oil, leather, and something cooking in a back room that made his stomach twist with hunger. 3 men sat around a scarred wooden table playing cards. 2 more leaned against a workbench mid-conversation. They all stopped when they saw him. Jamie wasn't sure what he expected. Maybe laughter, maybe anger. What he got was silence, which somehow felt worse. He stepped forward, holding the helmet in both hands like an offering. The thing was too big for him. Scuffed black with a faded Steel Pines decal peeling off the back. His sneakers squeaked against the concrete floor. Nobody moved. "I'll sell it for $5, Jamie said. His voice came out steadier than he felt. "I just need to eat." One of the card players, a barrel-chested guy with a gray beard braided down his chest, set his hand face down and leaned back in his chair. "That's a nice lid, kid. Where'd you get it?" Jamie swallowed. "It belonged to someone who won't ride again." The air shifted. One of the men at the workbench straightened up, eyes narrowing. The bearded guy, brown from the patch on his vest, stood and walked over slowly, boots heavy on the floor. He didn't reach for the helmet, just looked at it, then at Jamie. Who was he? "My brother, Troy." Brown's face stayed neutral, but his eyes shifted, recognition chasing grief. He glanced over Jamie's shoulder toward the back of the room, where a wiry man with sun-damaged skin and forearms covered in faded ink had gone completely still. That man, Wells, stepped forward. His voice was rough like gravel under tires. "Troy Milner." Jamie nodded. Wells's jaw tightened. He crossed the space between them in 4 strides and crouched down so they were eye level. Up close, Jamie could see the lines around his mouth, the scar cutting through one eyebrow, and something else, something that looked like recognition, like grief. "I knew your brother," Wells said quietly. "Rode with him before I patched in here. He was Steel Pines, right? Ridge." Jamie's throat closed up. He hadn't heard anyone say Troy's road name in days. He managed a nod. Wells reached out slowly and rested one calloused hand on the helmet, but he didn't take it. "Route 19. Yeah." The room had gone still again, the kind of silence that carries weight, built on names spoken and remembered. Brown cleared his throat. "Kid, we're not buying that helmet." Jamie's chest tightened. He'd been stupid to come here. Stupid to think, because it's not for sale. Brown continued, voice firm. "That's your brother's. You keep it." "I can't," Jamie said, and hated how his voice cracked. "I need the money." Wells stood, still watching him. "Where are your people, Jamie?" "My sister, Kayla. She's 20. Parents, gone. 3 years now." Wells exchanged a look with Brown. Something passed between them, unspoken but understood. Brown crossed his arms. "Kayla working? 2 jobs. But rent's late. Fridge is empty. And there's some lady from the county who keeps calling about paperwork." "Child services," Wells said. It wasn't a question. Jamie nodded. Brown let out a slow breath, the kind that carried weight. He looked at the other men in the room, then back at Jamie. "You eaten today?" Jamie didn't answer, which was answer enough. "Mama T," Brown called toward the back. "Got a hungry kid out here." A woman's voice shouted back, muffled by distance and the clatter of pans. "Then feed him, you useless lump." Couple of the guys chuckled. Brown jerked his head toward a long table near the kitchen door. "Sit." Jamie hesitated, still clutching the helmet. "Go on," Wells said, softer now. "We'll talk after you eat." Jamie walked to the table and set the helmet down carefully, like it might shatter. A plate appeared in front of him moments later. Meatloaf, mashed potatoes, green beans that actually looked green. "Mama T, a stocky woman with silver streaks in her dark hair and reading glasses hanging from a beaded chain, stood over him with her hands on her hips. "You eat all of that," she said. "Then we'll figure out the rest." Jamie picked up his fork. His hands were shaking. Across the room, Wells pulled Brown aside. Their voices were low, but Jamie caught pieces of it. "Steel Pines is gonna want to know. You thinking what I'm thinking? Kid's got nobody. Troy would have done the same." Brown nodded slowly, then louder, so the whole room could hear. "Anybody got a problem helping out Ridge's little brother?" Silence. Then one by one, heads shook. Someone muttered, "Not a chance." Jamie ate slowly, every bite sitting heavy in his chest. When he looked up, Wells was sitting across from him, Troy's helmet resting between them on the table. "You're not selling this," Wells said. "And you're not going hungry again. Understood." Jamie stared at him, confused, suspicious, hopeful. "Why?" Wells leaned back, arms crossed. "Because your brother never let anyone eat alone. And neither do we." Jamie felt something loosen in his chest, a weight shifting, finally shared, like standing on ground that wouldn't collapse the moment he moved. Jamie showed up at the clubhouse the next afternoon without being told to. He stood outside for 5 minutes before walking in, hands shoved deep in his hoodie pockets. Rocco was already in the garage bay, half buried under the frame of a '78 shovelhead, cursing softly at a seized bolt. "You gonna stand there or make yourself useful?" Rocco called without looking up. Jamie blinked. "I wasn't sure if..." "Brooms in the corner. Start with the back wall and work forward. Don't miss the corners." It wasn't a request. Jamie grabbed the broom. For the first hour, neither of them spoke. Rocco worked with the kind of focus that didn't leave room for conversation, his hands moving between tools like he'd been born holding a wrench. Jamie swept slowly, methodically, watching from the corner of his eye as Rocco finally freed the bolt and grunted in satisfaction. "Hand me that rag," Rocco said, pointing without turning around. Jamie grabbed it and stepped closer. Rocco wiped his hands, then glanced at the freshly swept floor. "Not bad. You miss anything?" "No, sir." Rocco's mouth twitched, something between approval and amusement. "Don't call me sir. Makes me feel old." He nodded toward the bike. "You know what this is?" "Harley. Shovelhead engine." Rocco raised an eyebrow. "Troy teach you that?" "He used to let me sit in the garage while he worked. Didn't touch anything. Just watched." Rocco studied him for a moment, then turned back to the bike. "All right, come here. I'll show you why this bastard's been fighting me all morning." Jamie moved closer and Rocco started talking, explaining the engine's compression, why old Harleys ran hot, how this particular model had a reputation for being stubborn but loyal. His voice was gruff but patient. When he handed Jamie a socket wrench and told him to try loosening the next bolt, Jamie's hands trembled slightly, but he did it. Slow, careful. "Good," Rocco said. "You've got steady hands. That matters more than strength." By the time the sun started sinking, Jamie had learned the names of a dozen tools and how to check oil without spilling it everywhere. Rocco didn't mention payment, didn't mention charity, just told him to come back tomorrow if he wanted to learn something useful. Jamie walked out of the garage and nearly collided with a younger guy carrying a six-pack toward the main room. The guy stopped, looked down at him, and his expression shifted, recognition settling into something warmer. "You're Ridge's brother," he said. Jamie nodded. "I'm Fletch." He shifted the six-pack to one hand and extended the other. Jamie shook it. Fletch's grip was firm but not aggressive. "Heard what happened. I'm sorry, man. Troy was solid." "You knew him?" "Met him once at a cross club run. He pulled over when my chain snapped, helped me fix it in the rain." "Didn't have to." Fletch tilted his head toward the main room. "You sticking around?" "I don't know. Maybe." Fletch nodded slowly. "I was in foster care until I was 17. Aged out with nowhere to go. This place took me in when nobody else would." He paused, then added quietly, "It's not a handout. It's family." But you gotta let it be. Jamie didn't know what to say. Fletch clapped him on the shoulder and walked past. Jamie stood in the doorway, chest tight with something he couldn't name yet. Too big to be gratitude, too raw to be hope. Across town, Kayla was 3 hours into her diner shift when Mama T walked in. She sat at the counter, ordered coffee, and didn't leave until Kayla's break. When Kayla finally sat down, exhausted and wary, Mama T slid a business card across the table. Legal aid, Mama T said simply. They do guardianship cases. Pro bono if you qualify. Kayla stared at the card. I can't afford. Did I say anything about money? Mama T's tone carried an edge, but her eyes stayed kind. You're 20 years old trying to raise a kid on 2 part-time jobs while the state's breathing down your neck. You think you're the first person who needed help. Kayla's jaw tightened. I don't take charity. Good, because I'm not offering it. Mama T leaned forward. I'm offering you a phone number and a hot meal tomorrow night at the clubhouse. You come by, we'll sit down with someone who actually knows how this system works. After that, it's your choice. Kayla looked at the card, then at Mama T. Why? Because your brother-in-law rode with people who don't forget. And because Jamie walked into our place trying to sell his grief for $5. That's not happening on my watch. Mama T stood, dropped a 10 on the counter for the coffee, and headed for the door. She paused at the threshold. 7 o'clock tomorrow. Don't make me come drag you. The next evening, Kayla walked into the clubhouse with her shoulders tense and her guard up. Mama T met her at the door, handed her a plate of lasagna, and introduced her to a woman named Ruth, a lawyer with kind eyes and a briefcase full of paperwork. They sat at a corner table while the clubhouse hummed with low conversation around them. Ruth explained emergency guardianship, temporary custody orders, and what Kayla needed to file to keep the state from splitting her and Jamie up. She walked her through every form, every signature, every piece of documentation they'd need. Kayla's hands shook as she signed her name over and over, but Ruth's voice stayed calm and steady. You're doing the right thing, Ruth said, and you're not doing it alone. When Kayla looked up, Mama T was refilling her coffee without asking. Across the room, Jamie sat next to Fletch at the bar, the two of them talking quietly. Fletch said something that made Jamie almost smile, just a flicker, but it was there. Kayla's throat tightened. She turned back to Ruth. What do I owe you? Nothing, Ruth said. Mama T already covered my time with the best pot roast I've had in years. Kayla blinked, then looked at Mama T, who just shrugged. You'll pay it forward someday. That's how this works. By the time Kayla and Jamie left that night, the guardianship paperwork was filed and a court date was set. Kayla's lungs finally expanded fully, oxygen reaching places that had been locked tight for weeks. Jamie fell asleep in the passenger seat on the way home, his head against the window, still smelling faintly of motor oil. He was still holding Troy's helmet in his lap. Wells made the call on a Wednesday night, standing outside the clubhouse with his phone pressed to his ear and a cigarette burning down between his fingers. The voice on the other end belonged to Tuck, Steel Pines road captain, a man Wells hadn't spoken to in 3 years, not since the transfer that came with its own baggage and bruised pride. We ride for Ridge this Saturday, Wells said, no preamble. His kid brother's here. Thought you'd want to know. Silence stretched between them, loaded with 3 years of distance. Then Tuck's voice came through, rough but certain. We'll be there. What time? Noon. Route 19. We'll meet at the mile marker. Wells. Tuck's tone shifted. It's been a while. I know. This changes things. Yeah, Wells said quietly. It does. Saturday morning came cold and sharp, the kind that made asphalt glitter and engines echo off storefronts. Jamie stood in the Crow Hollow parking lot wearing jeans that actually fit. Mama T had taken him shopping 2 days prior, ignoring his protests, and Troy's old riding vest, altered by one of the club's old ladies to sit properly on his narrower shoulders. The Steel Pines patch had been left untouched on the back, a mark of respect that nobody questioned. Fletch walked over and handed him a pair of gloves. You're gonna want these. Gets cold on the back of a bike at speed. Jamie took them, his fingers tracing the worn leather. I've never been on a ride like this before. Nobody has their first memorial ride and comes out the same, Fletch said. Breathe through it. And if you crack, that's allowed. Every single one of us has. Wells appeared beside them, helmet under one arm. He looked at Jamie, then at the vest, and something softened in his expression. You ready? Jamie nodded, though his stomach was a knot of nerves and something bigger he couldn't name. Troy's helmet stays strapped to the sissy bar, Wells said. That's how we carry the ones who can't ride with us anymore. You good with that? Jamie's throat tightened, but he nodded again. Wells clapped him once on the shoulder, then turned toward his bike. Engines started roaring to life one by one, a chorus of thunder that vibrated through Jamie's chest. He climbed onto the back of Wells's bike, gripping the passenger handles while Troy's helmet sat secured behind him, visible to everyone who followed. Kayla stood near the support van with Mama T, her arms crossed tight against the wind. Mama T handed her a tissue before she even realized she needed one. He'll be all right, Mama T said. I know, Kayla whispered. That's what scares me. The convoy rolled out in formation. Crow Hollow in front, nearly 20 bikes strong. Their engines synchronized into a rolling growl that turned heads on every street they passed. As they approached Route 19, another group appeared on the horizon, coming from the opposite direction. Steel Pines MC. The two clubs slowed as they converged, engines idling as road captains exchanged nods. Tuck pulled up beside Wells, his bike a custom bagger with Steel Pines colors painted across the tank. He looked at Jamie, then at the helmet strapped behind him, and his jaw worked for a moment before he spoke. Ridge was one of ours, Tuck said. Glad his brothers got people. Wells nodded. He does now. The combined group merged into a single procession, a wall of chrome and leather that stretched the length of 2 football fields. They rode in silence, no music, no revving, just the steady hum of engines and the wind cutting past. When they reached the mile marker where Troy had gone down, Wells slowed and pulled to the shoulder. One by one, the other bikes followed, lining the roadside like sentinels. Jamie climbed off, his legs shaky, and stared at the stretch of asphalt that looked no different from any other piece of road. But Fletch was beside him, and Brown was there too, and suddenly the whole procession had formed a loose circle around the spot. Tuck stepped forward holding a bottle of whiskey. He poured a measure onto the gravel, the liquid darkening the dirt. To Troy Ridge Milner, brother, rider, the kind of man who stopped for strangers and never rode past someone in need. To Ridge, the crowd echoed, voices low and reverent. One by one, riders came forward. Some laid flowers. Others poured liquor or left small tokens, coins, patches, photographs. A Steel Pines member placed a wrench at the base of the marker, explaining quietly that Troy once lent him tools and never asked for them back. Fletch leaned close to Jamie. You want to say anything? Jamie shook his head. Words felt too small. Instead, he walked forward and knelt at the marker, pressing one palm flat against the cold ground. He stayed there for a long moment, eyes closed, letting the rumble of idling engines wash over him like a wave. When he stood, Wells was waiting. He unstrapped Troy's helmet from the bike and handed it to Jamie. Carry it back. He rides with you now. Jamie took the helmet in both hands, holding it against his chest. The procession reformed, but this time, Steel Pines and Crow Hollow Road mixed together, no separation, no lines drawn. Just riders honoring one of their own. As they rolled back toward the clubhouse, Jamie looked down at the helmet in his lap, feeling something shift, less like an ending, more like a thread pulling him forward. Troy wasn't gone. He was here, in every engine that roared, in every hand that had reached out, in every mile of road they'd covered together. The ride back felt shorter, the weight felt lighter, and when they pulled into the Crow Hollow lot, the sun was starting to dip low, casting everything in gold. The clubhouse had transformed in their absence. Louder now, the kind of noise that comes when morning gives way to memory, when silence breaks into laughter that doesn't apologize for itself. Riders from both clubs spilled into the main room, shedding leather vests and settling into chairs like they'd done this 100 times before. Someone cranked up the stereo, classic rock pouring out at a volume that made conversation require effort. Mama T and two Steel Pines old ladies had taken over the kitchen, and the smell of grilled meat, cornbread, and something sweet filled every corner. Jamie stood near the doorway, still holding Troy's helmet, unsure where to put himself. Fletch appeared beside him with 2 bottles of root beer, handing one over without a word. They stood there together, watching the room fill up. "This is how we do it," Fletch said. "Mourn on the road. Celebrate when we get back." Troy would have wanted this. Jamie cracked open the bottle, the fizz loud in his hand. "How do you know?" "Because every rider does. We don't do silence and black clothes. We do engines and full plates." Fletch took a long drink. "Your brother lived loud. We're gonna remember him the same way." Across the room, Tuck and Brown stood near the bar, talking in low tones that gradually loosened into something closer to laughter. Old tensions dissolving in shared memory. A Steel Pines member walked over and shook Brown's hand, muttering something about "too damn long," and Brown nodded, gripping back hard. Rocco emerged from the kitchen carrying a platter of ribs that could have fed a small army. He spotted Jamie and jerked his chin toward an open seat at the long table. "You eat yet?" Jamie shook his head. "Then sit. You're gonna waste away, and I didn't spend all week teaching you torque specs for nothing." Jamie sat. Fletch dropped into the chair beside him. Within minutes, the table was packed, Crow Hollow on one side, Steel Pines on the other, but the divide felt ceremonial rather than real. Plates passed back and forth. Stories started flowing. A Steel Pines rider named Mac leaned forward, pointing at Jamie with a rib bone. "Your brother once rode 6 hours in a thunderstorm to deliver a part 1 needed for a build. Showed up soaked to the bone, handed me the package and said, 'Don't let it rust.' That was it. No fanfare." Another voice chimed in. "He taught me how to adjust my carburetor on the side of the highway at 2 in the morning. Didn't complain once. Ridge pulled me out of a bar fight I had no business being in," someone else added. "Took a punch meant for me and then bought me coffee after." Jamie listened, each story adding dimension to a brother he thought he knew. Troy the road warrior, who fixed things without announcing it, who earned trust by showing up. Jamie's chest ached, but the pain had substance now, weight instead of emptiness, something solid enough to hold on to. After the food, after the dishes had been cleared and the music turned low, Wells stood and motioned for Jamie to follow. They walked to the far wall where a wooden plaque hung, old, dark with age, covered in names carved into the grain. "The honor board. Every rider here who's gone down gets remembered," Wells said. "We don't let them fade. We keep their names where we can see them every day." He pulled the plaque down carefully and set it on a workbench beneath a single hanging light. From a drawer, he retrieved a wood-burning tool and plugged it in. The tip glowed orange as it heated. Wells tested it on a scrap piece, then looked at Jamie. "You want to help?" Jamie's breath caught. "I don't know how. I'll guide your hand. But this should be something you're part of." Jamie nodded, unable to speak. Wells positioned the tool, then placed Jamie's hand over his own. Together, they traced the letters into the wood, slow and deliberate, the smell of burning oak filling the air. Troy Ridge Milner brother. Road warrior. Never forgotten. When the last letter was done, Wells pulled back and let Jamie finish the final curve of the N on his own. Then, below it, Wells burned another line, smaller but no less permanent. "Jamie $5 Milner rides in his name." Jamie stared at the words, his vision blurring. Wells set the tool down and rested a hand on his shoulder. "You're not just Ridge's brother anymore. You're one of us. That means something here." Behind them, the room had gone quiet. When Jamie turned, he saw faces watching. Crow Hollow, Steel Pines, Kayla standing near Mama T with tears streaking her face. Fletch raised his bottle without a word. Tuck's nod was brief, solemn, and certain. Wells lifted the plaque and hung it back on the wall. Jamie stepped closer, running his fingers over the fresh letters, still warm to the touch. "Thank you," Jamie whispered. "Don't thank me," Wells said. "Just remember it. And when someone else walks in here needing help, you do the same." Later that night, after most of the crowd had filtered out and only a handful of people remained, Jamie sat on a worn couch with Troy's helmet resting on the coffee table in front of him. Kayla sat beside him, her head on his shoulder, exhausted but steady. Mama T brought them both hot chocolate without asking, and Rocco tossed a blanket over the back of the couch as he passed. Fletch flopped into a chair across from them, feet propped up, looking half asleep but content. "You sticking around tomorrow?" he asked Jamie. Jamie glanced at Kayla, who nodded. He looked back at Fletch. "Yeah. Rocco said he'd teach me how to rebuild a carburetor." Fletch grinned. "Good. Someone's got to carry on Ridge's legacy of being annoyingly good at fixing things." Jamie almost smiled. Almost. He looked at the helmet, scuffed, worn, marked by miles and memory. He didn't sell it, didn't lose it, and he wasn't carrying it alone anymore. Outside, engines rumbled as the last few riders headed home. Inside, the clubhouse settled into a comfortable quiet. Jamie closed his eyes. Since Troy died, peace had felt impossible. But sitting here, Kayla breathing steady, Fletch half asleep across from him, Troy's helmet within reach, Jamie realized peace wasn't the absence of grief. It was having people who'd help carry it when it got too heavy to hold alone. Sometimes the people who save us aren't the ones we expect. They're the ones who see us when we're trying to disappear. What would you have done if Jamie walked through your door? Drop your thoughts below. And if this story moved you, hit like and subscribe to embrace the journey, because every story we share is one worth remembering.